Yeah, I can hear you. You can hear me. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you. Excellent. Okay. So you had a few little problems setting up, eh? Yeah. Don't worry, we have the same problem with our system, so
Oh, we've just changed to a new system because we moved location.
yeah.
And this is probably the second time we've had a presenter going, and my head brain farted with the whole idea of
Yeah.
needing a different input. So that's all right. It's now sorted.
Yeah. Good, good. Good, good.
So what's going to happen is
Hello, come on in.
Hello.
Okay, everybody, 2 seconds for me before I hand back over to Nicola. Firstly, another thank you to Penny and Nicola for that 7 o'clock session. It was really cool. I just want to add something about the mentoring system. If there is anybody who is vaguely interested in being mentored on how to be president, I'm quite happy to train the next one. So just put your name down there and we'll work you into that. Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention before we go forward is next week, I'm not going to be here, but we've got the image critique session, and with about a dozen images entered so far, I really want to push that home. It's not a lot of point if we don't have many images. So anything you've got, all the way through your files, and just everybody has a photograph somewhere which talks about emotion. It's the story behind it is some sort of emotion, whether it's happiness, surprise, love, whatever. There's a bajillion emotions that you can express, and I'm sure you've done it before. So go and find an image where you have expressed some sort of emotion. If the image is about an emotion, then enter it. We'd like 30 or 40 pictures to be talked about in a wide range of things. So the emotion could be being expressed by your dog, your cat, your child, your grandchild, your partner, somebody you saw playing rugby who was super excited because they've just scored a try. Lots and lots of possibilities. Jane. There we go. Passion and the things that you like doing. Something that we all photograph, something that we're interested in. So figure out what it is you're interested in and then make sure you enter it. Otherwise, it sort of defeats the purpose of next week. Okay, natural history number 1. I'll pass you over.
Okay, just a reminder, if you can please put your phones on silent, and exits is out the back and out the front, and toilets are out that side. So tonight our natural history judge is Bob McCree, and Bob, I found some stuff online about you, and it's not all bad. My interest.
I'm not listening.
Yeah. I found this. It said that his interest in photography was sparked in his late teens when he purchased a Japanese Nyoka 36mm camera, and he went through the usual process of home processing and printing. But ultimately, he ended up as a transparency worker in the days of Kodachrome 25. After he got married, he let this craft lapse in the interest of financial stability and other interests. In the 1980s, his diminishing energy levels led him to searching for alternative interests. At the time, a fellow employee offered him a second-hand Nikon camera, and he was away again. He fell back on his preferences for transparency film, but the biggest influence on his photographic future and the best decision he ever made in the field was to join the local Howick Camera Club and to become actively involved in competition within the club and ultimately at salon and national level. When encouragement from members within the club, he ultimately applied for his honours and was progressively awarded an associateship, then a fellowship, both surprisingly at the first application. As his skills progressed, he started to build a small market in the general publishing area, an activity which I continue to pursue as I approach my dotage. Cute. I did have a look through some of his photos online, and yeah, very high calibre. They're really interesting. He's obviously had lots of amazing adventures around New Zealand. The advent of digital posed a major learning curve, but also a problem for his expanding photo library, which was totally in the analogue format. He was not an early adapter of the new format, but once he took the plunge, realised with the extra flexibility that the new forwarded, he could explore much wider genre, which he's certainly done. He's also had commercial aspects of photography, and he's been a member of the Howick Camera Club for around 30 years now. He's been on the club's committee for all but the first year, and he's also served a few years on the PSNZ Council. And he's also a very keen judge. Initially started in the local area, but has continued nationally as a panel judge, and was appointed to the Honours Board in 2016. His interest these days extends to most aspects of the craft and genres of photography. His core interests lie where it all began, in landscape and pictorial, but he really does enjoy the flexibility that digital has afforded us in pursuing fresh areas. His energies these days are in the local area, and he likes passing his knowledge on to those commencing their photographic journeys and using his judging activities both as critiquing function, but more particularly as an educational function. He's a great believer that the best way to progress in this wonderful craft is to enter through the competitive field, initially at club level, and use the resulting critique as the learning tool and the step to your higher achievement. So photography to him has given him so much pleasure, comradeship, skill and personal development that I now wish to pass on to newbies a little of the tremendous pleasure which I have so enjoyed from this wonderful craft for the 30 odd years. So over to you, Bob. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nicola, and thank you as a club inviting me to assess your natural history images #1 tonight. It's a pleasure. It's what I used to, in my travels, which I'm somewhat curtailed on now, I used to get down your way and would often turn up at your club on a Wednesday night. I believe you shifted premises now, but maybe next time I get down your way, maybe I'll be able to get along and have a look at what you're doing in new premises. Okay, so we've got 41 images here tonight. I found it interesting that you as a club don't grade the judging in this particular competition, which was quite interesting. I'm kind of used to grading things down according to the grades under which you are. Anyway, there's some nice images there, and my general comment on them is that a lot of them, look, the basis of most of the images were fine, but I felt that on many of them you could have done a little bit more post-production or post-taking work in your photo editing to really make the images sing, to make them look better. The other little comment, I think most of you, or many of you, had your scientific names there. Some didn't, I note. And I think it's a good idea. It's a good practice to get into when you're involved in nature and natural history, just to try and put a scientific name against whatever you're photographing. I think one of the interesting things with natural history is actually delving into Google and what have you, to research a little bit more about what you photographed, it be a bird or a plant or fungus or whatever. And that's part of the learning curve as well, apart from the photographic aspects of it. It's great that you do expand your knowledge on the wonderful world of nature and natural history. Some other sort of general comments. Of course, you can't play around with natural history or nature images. One should abide by the so-called rules. But one of the things that I'm pretty hard on or concerned about is your backgrounds. I mean, it applies to all photography when it's all said and done. No matter what you're photographing, you're putting an image against a background or on a background. And it's very important, I think, to have that background there, particularly in nature and natural history, because that gives the image context. It allows you to see where it's been taken, what it's all about, and what the environment is. Of course, we're not allowed to add or subtract. So that again does make it a little bit more different to normal photography, where you can, if you wish, play around a little bit with the backgrounds and dolly them up and perhaps change things a bit. So in natural history or nature, it's well worth just if you have time. I mean, and a lot of the stuff you're taking is reasonably static. Just have a look at what's behind your subject, and if necessary, or if you are able, move the camera around or move yourself around to make certain you're going to get a background that is not going to be intrusive on the subject which you're taking. And I'll probably make a few comments on quite a few of them as we go along on that attitude. Um, the other point is one thing that my understanding in nature and natural history is that you can alter the lighting. You can't add or subtract anything into your image, but you can alter the lighting ratios, make the background dark or lighter, same on your subject. And I note that quite a few, and I will make this comment, I think, as we go through, that quite a few images could have done with a little bit more attention in that area. Um, the other thing is if you're photographing a bird or an animal or something like that, um, it can be quite static if you just photograph whatever it is standing there doing nothing. So it is often useful if you can wait and capture whatever your subject is doing something, whether it's feeding or relating to another, the environment or to another of its species. So just try and see if you can, rather than just have a subject standing there, see if you can get it moving around or doing something that just gives a little bit more vibrancy, if you like, to the image. Quite a few birds and are in this collection as well. Most of them are birds standing around or doing something, which is fine. Perhaps a bit more difficult to get them in flight. You may have to wait around for a while, but I think it is worthwhile if you can. It's a bit more difficult to do. You've got to be quick on your feet, if you like, have high shutter speeds and all that sort of thing. But that, if you can capture a bird in flight, taking off, landing, or what have you, I think is quite useful and just adds that little bit more interest the to the image. And of course, the other thing which applies to all photography, I always say get it right in camera. Try and get your exposures right, get your backgrounds right, as I said beforehand. And when you're coming to actually get it ready for presentation, or actually when you're taking it, it pays to check your histogram to make certain you've got the best exposure you can get, so that when it does come around to altering the lighting, if you like, or tonality or what have you in the image, that you've got as much information on your sensor as you can. So that's just my general comments on your images tonight. So I guess without further ado, we can start looking and commenting on the various images for you. Now, you're going to read out the names of all, Andrew, on these, or?
Yep, the first one is the Kia.
Yeah, okay. And again, the first comment I'll make is it would be helpful if we could have the scientific name for this is Nesta non-tabilis, I think, from memory. So it's not going to affect how I assess or judge the images. It's just as I said earlier on, I think it's good practice to give that name if you can. The it may possibly impress the judge, of course, but it does at least say that you looked and done a bit of research and found out what it's all about. Okay, with this one, it's nice and sharp. There's potentially some good detail here on this one, but it's one where I think you could have done a bit more post-production work on it to really bring out the lovely feather detail that you have captured on it. If you look at it now, if you look at the lighting ratios in the image as presented, the bird itself is quite dark. There's some, as you probably know, you know better than I because you're in the South Island. It's the South Island bird. There's some lovely green, iridescent green colours in the bird. And I don't think the way you've actually presented it is actually reflecting that lovely tonalities in the bird itself. The detail's there in the capture, but it just needs a little bit more exposure, a little bit more lighting on the bird to really bring out that detail and that tonality. The other aspect of it with the lighting ratios, your background is actually brighter than the subject, and I would think bring out the lighting and tonality on the body of the bird and pull back the lighting on the background so that the bird does pop out in all its beauty. The other little point about it has probably been taken in with a blue sky above because there's quite a lot of blue UV in the stone, is it? Or rock or whatever, rock or tree or whatever it's standing on. I think that could be corrected as well. So are you reading out the marks there,
Yeah, next one is score 2. It's a monarch butterfly.
Yep. Yeah. This one, your lighting ratios are better here. As you can see, we've got some lovely light on the chrysalis here of the monarch butterfly. Good. I don't know what's happening down your way, but we've hardly seen one up here this year. We used to get heaps of them. There's something going on somewhere in the environment, apparently, and I don't know. Anyway, you've got some lovely lighting there, and it's presented against a good contextual background on a log or a tree or something or other. All that's great. But again, just watch your lighting. You've got that bright lighting across the top there. I think that could have been quite readily pulled back in your photo editing so that it's not competing, if you like, with the main subject. You could also perhaps brighten up just a little bit in the area from which the chrysalis is suspended. Okay.
Score 2, southern black-backed gull with Pippi.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we've got something happening here with the bird taking off, which is fine. And it's got something in its mouth there. It's the bird's comparatively distant within the image. I think you cropped it down a bit by the looks of the way it's presented. But the good points are we've got something happening. It's about to take off. It's got something in its mouth. So it's done its scavenging for the day and it's about to take off and enjoy a feed. So that's all great. I think that's great. I'm not sure about the reflection there. I guess I know why you've got it in there. But I wonder whether we need it or need it all. I think this image might have been better presented a bit more in the landscape format. Just so that we've got the sense of the bird moving into where it's going rather than being compressed in. The tonality's good on the bird. I would like to see some more detail again in your post-processing um, under the wing, and particularly where the whites there are quite grey, and also in the black wing on the left-hand side where the detail is sort of lacking somewhat. Thank you.
Score 2, Poaka pied still looking for feed.
Yep. Similar comments here again. You've put it in the portrait format. I don't think you need most of what you've got there in the foreground. It's all out of focus. The context or the environment in which we find the bird is shown. So I think cropping, as it stands at the moment, cropping off the bottom half, I think would be a more valid image. Maybe possibly in the landscape format or a bit more in the landscape format, I think would be helpful. There's some reasonable detail in the whites on the bird, which is fine. But again, on the blacks, we haven't got much detail there. And I suspect that you could draw just a little bit more detail so we get a sense of the feather structure, etc., in the bird. It's doing something which is fine, which is poking around looking for a feed. Thank you.
Score 2, Kuriro New Zealand wood pigeon.
Yeah, nice image of the wood pigeon. The it's shows the environment and where it's been or where it's feeding. I think that's great. A bit of that is out of focus. I'm not sure that you need all of the bottom of it because it's not really sharp. There's not very much depth of field there. You've got the bird sharp. You've got some lovely detail in the bird, which is great. And the tonalities are quite good. I think they could be just enhanced a little just to bring out again the lovely iridescent tonalities in the body of the bird. In the background there, you've got a couple of yellow berries or something there. Again, I think if it were mine, I'd be taking those right down. I wouldn't be removing them because we're not supposed to do that. But I'd certainly take them down so that they're not so dominant in the image, because that's where my eye is going. So that would be my thoughts here. Crop off the bottom. And also you've got on the left there, behind the back of the bird, some bright areas there, which I think would be a bit hard to get rid of, but you could at least, I think, tone them back a little bit. Okay.
Score 2, Pro Arctis Hokuri.
Yeah, interesting image here. You're capturing us doing something which is great. I love the fact that you've got sand flying in all directions and all that sort of thing. You've moved in reasonably close to the subject, which is great. You could possibly crop off a little bit off the bottom there. My preference, I think, would be to do that so that we just come in a bit more closely onto the subject itself. And I would like to see you bring out more detail on the body of the subject. You've got quite a few dark areas in there. We can't see the eye. It is there, I think. Yes, it is. But I'd just like to see you draw, particularly in those shadow areas there above the head and on the bottom left of the subject, just bring that detail out just to give it more context. It's kind of a little bit camouflaged, if you like, in the background, which is probably intentional in many ways. But I think for our photographic purposes and for us to view what you've taken, I'd just like you to see you do a little bit about your lighting and bringing out that detail because it is potentially a very nice image. You could probably take a little bit off the top too, if you like, just to concentrate without losing the feel of what's actually happening there as well. Okay.
Score 2, seagull resting.
Yep. Another one where I felt the lighting ratios are a bit unfortunate. It's potentially a nice shot image of this gull. There's potentially, well, there is some great image in the white on the bird, but the black wing structure area is potentially there, but we're not seeing much of it. I think in both cases, both the head and shoulders of the bird, if you like, plus the wing feather details there, I think you could do a lot of work in post to really bring that detail out. Also, we've got the eye, it's nice and sharp, but it needs a little bit of brightness added in there so we can just see that detail and it then becomes a focal point in the image. Again, with the background, we've got a bright patch of light in behind there. I'd certainly be trying to pull that back a bit because at the moment it's the brightest part of the image, and really it should be the other way around. It should be the bird that's the brightest part, and it should be standing out from the environment. And you could achieve that to some degree, I think, in post.
Nestor notabilis.
Yes, the Kia again. Eh? Yes, you got this in its natural environment. You photographed it there, which is fine. Um, it's an alpine environment as well, you all know down there. And you are showing that quite well, I felt. Again, it's an image that I felt could be better presented in terms of the lighting and exposure on the bird. The background at the moment is, if you like, the brightest part of the image, particularly the snow. There's probably not much you can do about the snow and ice, but the rocks in behind there, I think, could be pulled back and the exposure on there and the exposure on the bird brightened up so that we really make the bird stand out from its environment. It's, as I say, a good storytelling image. Again, I'm a little bit ambivalent about it in the portrait format. Uh, I think if it were me, I'd square it off a bit or even present it in a bit more of a landscape so that we see more of the bird and a little bit less of the environment.
Score 3, first of the acceptance. So this is a goldfinch.
Yeah, brightly coloured birds, aren't they? And they're very hard to photograph too, as I've found. There's a place we go out the back of Howick here, Early's wetlands, if you're ever in Auckland, is worth a visit. And we do see these there occasionally, but it's very difficult to get close to them. They're usually in a group of them, and one bird see you, bang, they're off. So full marks for capturing this bird. Um, it's fundamental problem with it, if you like, unfortunately, is it really isn't as sharp as it could be. I would suggest that when you're presenting something like this, whilst it does show the environment the way you've shown it, the bird itself is the less, well, I won't say less significant part of the image. It takes up a lesser area in the image. And I feel that you could crop it down quite a bit to really make the bird the main part of the image. image and still not lose that environmental detail which you've captured there in the background and in the raupo or whatever it's standing on. Again, the background is a little bright or a little intrusive. I might have pulled that back a bit, but the fundamental problem is it's just not quite as sharp as it could be. I'm not quite sure why that's the case, whether it's you've blown it up excessively or whether your hand holding and your shutter speeds, etc., and focusing weren't quite right. So that's my comments there.
The score 3, the African great egret in Kenya.
Yeah, beautiful birds. Very similar, being an egret, I guess, very similar to our kotuku, very similar to the, if you ever go over to Australia, particularly on the east coast of Australia, around the estuaries there, they're tuapeni, the great Australian egret. But they are beautiful birds to photograph, not only because of the purity of the white, etc., but because of their size and particularly their actions when they take off or get into flight. Now, what you've captured here is fine in the sense that you've got the bird about to either take off or land. I'm not quite sure which, because I can't see whether the flaps are up or down at the time. But anyway, so you captured that action well. There's some nice environmental information here with the wetlands background there and the little flowers there and that, but it's overexposed, unfortunately. Now, I'm not sure whether that was in the original taking or whether it's in your processing, but I would love to have seen it just better exposed. You could probably pull that exposure back on the bird to some extent, and certainly I think to the extent that you could bring out that lovely wing detail, wing feather detail, which you've captured there, which is lovely. But it's just the fact that it as presented, appears to be somewhat overexposed, means that I cannot give it a higher mark, which I would perhaps love to have done.
Score 3, male Turdus marula, a European blackbird collecting garden worms.
Yep, there's again, you've captured the bird, having been feeding around the garden, around the lawn, as they tend to do. That's great. You've got that nicely. Your lighting ratios, just to my mind, a wee bit out on this one. The background is contextual, it's environmental, that's fine, but it's brighter, if you like, or exposure on it. It appears to be brighter than what we have on the body of the bird, which is the body of the bird. There's plenty of detail in there, but it just needs you're drawing that out in your post-production to really make the bird stand out from the background. So my comments there, and also if you look at the beak and the worms or whatever it has in its beak there, they need pulling back a bit too, because they're not kind of standing out the way they should against both the beak and the environment. So just a little bit of work on that. The eye is good. We can see the eye, it's reasonably bright. It could be brightened a wee bit more, but just look at your lighting ratios before you present it and just do that work to really make the image stand out.
Score 3, Interloma distinctum.
Yep. When I first got into natural history work, it's way back in the old film days, and it was one of the first things I did. I love macro. It's kind of, apart from the landscape work I was doing at the time, this is about the only other thing I was doing in those days. We now, our club now does an annual, I think your club might do too, an annual fungi hunt, which is great fun. And it's a great way of getting into a little bit of nature, natural history, photography, and also great exercise in macro photography. This one, you've shown us the environment, which is great. It could be a little sharper, perhaps, I think, although depending on how close you are to these things, sometimes it is difficult to get sharpness across the whole background. The subject itself is reasonably sharp. It's not perhaps the best specimen of this fungi. And the other comment I would make is that um, I'm not sure how you photograph these things, but I always carry a white card with me, or as I say, an expensive sheet of A4 paper. And I use that as a reflector to reflect on the underside of the fungi to bring out and brighten up the detail of the gills underneath. And I think this is what would have helped this image no end had you been able to do that. Because as you can see there, most of the underside of the fungi is going off into shadow. And it wouldn't take much, just with a sheet of white paper, to do a fill in and just bring out that lovely detail. And I think that would help this image no end.
Score 3, fern bird matata.
Yep, nicely capture of the bird. It's taken in nice lighting. Um, you're probably aware if you're doing bird photography in particular, it's often best to be able to do it in a flat lighting condition or a portrait lighting condition because that gets rid of the light and shadow problems that you often will have uh, sometimes on the subject, but more particularly on the background. This one has obviously been taken on that sort of lighting condition, and we've got all that detail across the background as well as the lovely detail on the bird itself. The bird's singing away or chirping away, it's got its mouth open, so there's something happening. That's all fine. Um, I personally would have liked to have seen you crop that image somewhat more. As it stands at the moment, the bird is the lesser part of the image, if you like. I think would improve the image and just enable us to concentrate more on this subject. By doing that, you would still have the environmental and contextual information there, but it would then help put the emphasis on the bird. You could probably just do a little bit of post-production work on the feather detail on the bird, particularly in the brown areas, just to make it further stand out against the environment, against the background.
Score 3, Orocorumbus flexuacilis.
Phew, it's a long name, isn't it? Um, I don't envy your job of reading out some of these names, Nicola. Always interesting. Yep. Um, excuse me. Um, you pretty much filled the frame with this insect, if you like. There's some reasonable detail there, although I think it could have been a little bit sharper. The When you're photographing or anything in nature, be an insect or a bird or an animal, it always pays to get the eye sharp. It's a bit like portraiture in a sense, isn't it? That get the eyes right and the rest kind of falls into place, if you like. And it's quite true here. Um, the the focus seems to have been more on the body and the tail end of the body rather than the front end. Um, it could, I think, could have been sharpened somewhat. I'm not sure whether you've tried any sharpening in your post-processing, but that might be worthwhile looking at doing. Um, it's in context. We can see its environment. We know what it's on. That's fine. Um, Again, with the brightness of the flowers, I wonder whether we need to have all of the flowers there, particularly the top end of the flowers. I think just cropping that off a bit to lessen, if you like, the brightness of the yellow would be helpful in enabling us to concentrate more on the subject itself. You could perhaps just brighten up a little bit of the inner part of the flower as well, particularly the dark areas across the bottom and right hand side. Thank you.
Goodness me. Verox is eagle owl something 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 owl.
I didn't actually record what it was, so I can't help you on that one. Yeah, good on you for photographing this. It was obviously in a fairly difficult lighting condition, and that's hasn't really helped us in the sense that the sky, the specular light, if you like, coming through in the environment and the trees behind and to some degree on the branch on which it's sitting are kind of competing with the lighting and detail on the bird. Again, um, you could pull that background back a wee bit possibly, but I think what I would suggest you look at doing is actually brightening up the um, the um, the bird itself, the both on the chest of the bird and particularly about its face and eyes, just so that it stands out a little bit more against that bright background. Um, I think that would be worthwhile doing for you, and I think the subject would certainly look better and stand out better against that. I question whether the I'm not sure what's happening there on the body, on the feather detail on the bird itself, but it doesn't look to be very sharp. And I'm not sure whether you've lost detail there or whether you played around with it a little bit and tried to get it back, but it just doesn't look quite right. But so that's my comments there. Just be careful. I mean, case like this, there's probably not much you can do about that on the day you're out and about. And I guess if you were to move around and try and get it against a better background, you may well have disturbed it. So that's one of the problems you've always got when you're out and about in the field, unfortunately.
Score 3, Lastriopus velutina, a velvet fern.
Yes. And nicely photographed. Some good detail here and some reasonable lighting on the fern itself. Just a little bit dark up on the top, across the top of it there on the fern detail. The details there could perhaps have been just brought out a little bit more in your post-processing. Um, Unfortunately, the background there is quite dark. I'm not sure whether um, what your exposure may have been like on the overall image. Um, I would perhaps just like to see, rather than that black, dark space that you've got around the main frond of the fern, I'd just like to see a little bit of tonality, at least, if not detail, brought out in that. Even a bit of green, if it's on a green background, which it probably was, just so that we haven't got that harsh, dark background. Um, and it may be, it looks possibly that it may have been somewhat underexposed in the initial place, and which means that you makes it very difficult to bring detail out of shadows. So I'm not sure whether that was the case or not, but it gets back to what I said earlier on about when you're taking it, particularly when you're taking it something that's in reasonable light against a dark background. Just make certain that you get your exposure right. Check your histogram, because when it comes to post-processing, if you got that best exposure on your background, it does help you bring out the detail there, which helps put the image or the subject in context.
Mountain bladderwort.
Excuse me. Yeah, lovely little flowers, couple of flowers. Pity there weren't three there, because the old three always works better compositionally. But yes, you've got a reasonable exposure and reasonable detail on the flowers. They're quite nicely positioned within the frame. And as you can see, we've got contextual and environmental information in the background there. Unfortunately, to my eye, um, that detail, that comparative brightness in the background is competing with the subject matter. And I think a little bit of attention in there, I think would be helpful, and would just help the flowers stand out from that background. The other point is probably the left-hand side, where there is quite a bit of distraction, if you like, just even cropping that out and putting it into a full portrait mode, the image into a full portrait mode, and attending to the other bright areas on the right-hand side, I think would improve that image as well. It would also enhance the shape and form of the flowers and their stems as well.
Nesta notabilis on the wing.
Yes, you've caught it in action. That's great. That's the beauty of these birds, isn't it? Something I've, when I've been down, they've always tried to photograph them and never really been successful in catching them on the wing. So full marks to you for that. And as you can see there, potentially the beautiful detail that is potentially there, and I'll say potentially at this point, in the wing structure in particular, that lovely red underwing tonalities there, and the beautiful patterns and um, uh, what am I looking for? The word on the patterns and texture, if you like, of the feather structure, both on the wings and in the tail and in the bird. The unfortunate part about it is it's all overexposed, which is such a pity, because this, to me, is potentially a beautiful image, as I said earlier on. And unfortunately, it's not helped by the bright background, because if that background was pulled back and made somewhat darker, and if the exposure was corrected, either in the taking or in post, I think you'd have a really lovely image there, and it would be one which I would love to have given a higher mark than I have.
Kuramako, Anthornis melanura, Tiritiri martingi.
And that's a great spot to go to if you want to photograph these birds. Um, and it's difficult to photograph them there because of the environment, particularly on a bright day. Um, you've captured the bird well, I feel, uh, doing its things, presumably singing away as they tend to do. Lovely sound they make as well. Unfortunately, we can't hear that. Um, I think this is one again where your lighting ratios could well have been improved, and particularly in post processing. If we look at the body of the bird, it's a lot of it's in shadow, but the detail is there, and I feel it could be brought out selectively just to show that lovely detail and the darker tones on that part of the bird. The face and eye a bit the same. The branch or twig or whatever it's sitting on there could be pulled back in exposure a bit so that it's not, the brightness of it is not competing with that of the bird. And the background, which is nicely out of focus, but it is suggestive of its environment. The lighting on that needs to be pulled back so that with the any alterations you make to the bird, that it would pop out from its background. So again, it's potentially an image I think that could be vastly improved. And if that had been done, I'm sure I would have given it a higher mark. Just watch the brightness also on the middle to top left hand side there as well. Just pull that back.
Shoveler, Drake, Ducks, score 3.
Yep. Bright light sometimes is a little bit hard to control detail and bright lighting like this. And you can see there that the exposure on the head of the bird is perhaps a little bit overexposed. But I think you could, again, that's another one. I think you could do a little bit of work in post production to bring back some of that detail. The rest of the face and the beak is a little dark, so a little bit of work in there I think would help improve that and bring some detail out there. And the bird in behind, if it's darker here, some of the comments here, just do some work in there just to bring the lightings on there, but it being a darker tone, it's just a whisker unexposed in there. I think you could do some work there and really bring out that detail and a little bit also around the tails of both birds, and the image would pop somewhat more than what we have here at the moment. The detail on the water is good. Perhaps a little bit of cropping on the right would be helpful, and maybe just on the right would be fine, I think. So just an image that needs a little bit more work to really make it work, if you like.
Spoonbill in flight.
Yeah, they're everywhere now. Um, I can't recall. Well, they're obviously a fairly recent addition to uh, bird life in New Zealand, anyway. But they're really taken off, and I always wonder why they have been so successful over here after their self introduction, as opposed to the kotuku or white heron, which really hasn't increased its numbers substantially for its time in New Zealand, because they both sort of work in a sort of environment, don't they? Anyway, um, apart from that comment, uh, I'm, I'm not sure what you were setting out to do here. I love the image in the sense that it's almost a high key type image rather than a nature or natural history image. And that's basically because it's on a white background. Now, I can only assume what that white background was, but it looks like it might be a cloudy, overcast sort of a day. Um, but it has the effect of the bird sort of blending into its background so that it's almost as if it's poised in the middle of a void in the middle of nowhere. And I think from a natural history point of view, I would have liked to have seen you try to just bring out a little bit of detail there. There probably is, I suspect, a little bit of cloud detail or something there. And I think that would just be helpful in terms of the context of the environment in which you've taken this bird. It's beautiful, it's sharp. Um, you could perhaps do a little bit more work on, particularly on the whites in here and in the body of the bird in particular, that middle part of the body there and the shadow area there, and perhaps a little bit on the underwing on that left-hand wing. Just bring that detail out. But apart from that, it's been a good capture, and I think it could potentially be improved somewhat more if you wanted to use it again in natural history by trying to include a little bit of environmental image detail. If you're looking at using it as a high key image somewhere, fine. But again, I think just a little bit of context there would be helpful.
Score 3, Hemifanga, Nova Zealandia, Kururu.
Dead right. Covered all bases there. Um, yeah, again, very dark this one, and I'm not sure why. Whether it was your intention to show it that way. Don't think you took it at night time, of course. But again, with that darker background there, which you shot into shadow, uh, I perhaps like to see just a little bit more detail there, or certainly a bit of tonality, just to put it into context of what that environment is. But more particularly, I'd like to see you selectively brighten up the bird itself, both the body and the eyes, just to bring out that detail, because at the moment it's being lost in the overall darkness of the image. Even if you leave the background dark, selectively brightening up the body of it, I think would give you a more successful image, or more valid image, if you like. But I think working on both, um, and I think the detail certainly there in the body, and I suspect there's a bit of detail there in the background. But if your image originally is somewhat underexposed, it may be difficult to bring that out.
Score 3, Saddleback, Passiforums carancalutus.
Is that the South Island one, is it? There's two types of these apparently, and I'm not sure what the difference is. I have read it. Um, if you go out to Turi, and actually some of the mainland areas out of Turi and Little Barrier area, they're coming back to the mainland now. Up at Tawharanui, which is a regional park up near Warkworth, you can see them there now. They're becoming quite populous now. It's a good place to photograph them. Anyway, you've done well with this one in that you've captured the bird about to feed. You've got good environmental detail with the flax flowers there. That's all great. Uh, but again, your lighting ratios here, to my mind, just let this image down a little bit. We have a rather bright background there, which is kind of competing, if you like, with the subject. And we have the body of the bird with very little detail. And again, um, have a look at your exposure on the original and see if you could bring out more detail there. So we've got uh, much more feather detail, if you like, in the bird, because they are quite lovely tones in there. And I would just like to see that showing up. You've got the detail on the back where the light's hitting the back of the bird, but you haven't got it on the underside or the side away from the light. So see what you can do with that. You could perhaps brighten up a little bit of the flax flowers there as well. Just brighten up a little bit of the shadow areas there.
Royal Spoonbill, Kotuku Ngātu Papa.
Yep. Again, we've got similar comments regarding the lighting, if you like, on the subjects, particularly on the bird that's standing on the branch there. The whites overall are quite muddy, which suggests that they're somewhat underexposed. We do have detail in there, particularly on the standing bird, and I feel that with a little bit of subtle work and post-production, you could bring out that lovely white feather detail and some of the other tonalities. There's a little bit of yellow there in the bottom neck of the bird there. You could bring that out as well. And the bird flying, again, on the yellow on the body on the bird, just a little bit of work there and a little bit of subtle work, bring out that lovely feather detail on the bird in flight. The wing on the right-hand side, I think, would be helpful. The backgrounds and context is fine. You might possibly want to pull that back a little bit in terms of exposure, not much. But certainly I think I would be working, if it were mine, I'd be working on bringing out that beautiful detail that's inherently in the bodies of these two birds, bodies and wing details.
Male Californian quail, Calipela, California, sandbathing.
Gosh, it was very similar to an early one. It took me a while to try to read what they were, to pick out the detail. They were so similar in context, which is great. Excuse me. We have the bird doing something, which is great. The whole lot of sand and what have you flying around the place. That's great. We can see that. We can see the context where it is on the beach or somewhere on the shore of a riverbed or something like that. That's all great. What I would like to see again is that lovely detail of all the ruffled feathers on the bird itself. It's all there. It wouldn't take much to bring it out. And by so doing, you would actually bring out the subject as the main part of the image. Background's fine. It's in subdued lighting by and large, but it just needs the subject being brought out as to become, if you like, the highlight of the image, so that we can see that lovely detail and understand more about what is happening in the image. Because potentially it's great. You've captured some great action. There's one or two bright spots there on the right-hand side on those rocks, which actually you could crop those out or just bring back that bright area there as well.
Nesting cormorants, can't say that one, sorry, Carbo.
Again, we can see in good detail the environment in which these birds nest. And I think that all works great. It's fine. The exposure on the birds is fine. There's reasonable detail. The whites are not too blown out at all. The dark feathers on the bird on the right there, on its wing feathers. Perhaps you could just bring out a wee bit more detail there, I think would be helpful. You got down low and looked up and put it against the sky. That's fine. I kind of wonder personally whether you needed the bottom quarter or third there. I think if you were to crop a bit of it out at any rate, it would help bring the eye into the birds in the nest, which is the main part of the image. But if you don't crop too much out, you still got the environmental detail of putting it in its place where it is and where it's nesting. So I would look at doing that with it, which means probably you're going to with a more or less a square image, but that's fine. I think that little bit of cropping I think would help it and draw our eye even more into what's happening with the birds and the nesting.
Snow roller, a very rare meteorological phenomenon.
Yeah, I guess this is nature, isn't it? Um, as opposed perhaps to natural history. So that's fine. um, it's where you can see very much what's happening here in the environment. Um, and the way you've taken it has allowed us to see it's on a mountain. We can see some rocks there in the background. They just help close the image off from a compositional point of view, and the diagonal treatment you've made of the snow stream does help as well. I'm not sure that you need all the bottom of the image. Um, my tendency would be to crop off about a quarter of the bottom just to bring the eye into the main subject matter. I think with snow, it's very easy when you're capturing snow to uh, to underexpose it a wee bit and to get the grey areas. And we've got some here, as you can see. And I think just a little bit of selective exposure adjustments in those areas would just help to bring out that the purity of the colour of the snow and also a little bit of the snow detail there. It's hard to do and it's very easy uh, to get it wrong. But I mean, yeah, I think in this case you could correct this post processing. Yeah.
A leopard, Panthera pardus, on the morning hunt at Serengeti National Park.
I like the fact that you've used contre-jour lighting here on this one. As I'm a sucker for contre-jour lighting in any form of photography, and it's hard to pull off because often of the contrast, lighting contrasts that you're faced with. Um, in that sense, you're kind of saved here a bit by the fact that the environment in which you've captured it is actually reflecting light back into the body of the leopard itself. But in that sense, it also is competing, if you like, with the subject. So my thoughts here, and I had a look at it, is I think I tried to adjust the exposure on the body of the leopard. I bring it up quite a bit just to bring out that lovely detail on its body, and I would pull back the lighting on the bright areas on the around on the grass area there around it. Also, perhaps that green area at the across the middle top area. I think by doing that, you would actually bring out, apart from bringing out the lovely detail in the body of it, you'd also enhance the contre-jour lighting, which is sort of being lost a little bit in the brightness elsewhere around the image. Uh, even just you could probably crop a little bit off the bottom and possibly also the right hand side to lessen that brightness in the grass. I think this is potentially a lovely image, but it just needs, in my view, a little bit more work to really realize its potential.
Saltwater crocodile, kakadu.
Yeah, the bright lighting here is upsetting the lighting ratios a bit, if you like, in the sense that it's bringing up all the highlights in the background, which is a pity because the detail on the crocodile, and particularly on its mouth and inner workings there, just being lost a little bit by having to compete against the bright backgrounds. And that's often the problem of bright midday lighting, if you like. It's not so much the lighting on the subject, excuse me, but it's more the competition you've got with the lighting on the background. So my thoughts there would be try and pull back the lighting on the background to really make the detail of this crocodile stand out. Um, yeah, that's my comment there. Thank you.
Thank you. Porcelain fungus, Odominocelia musida.
That's the one. Um, yep. Cut my teeth on this sort of thing in the old days with macro. Used to love it. Love the discipline of photographing these things down in the bush. You've got it pretty right, I feel here. Lighting is not too harsh. In my view, never use a flash unless you know what you're doing. I always use my trusty, expensive sheet of A4 paper. Just use reflectors and use. But I always love photographing in natural light. Don't like using flash. Some people do, but my view is it's a God-given thing. If you like, use it. Use it to its advantage. So, having got through all that preamble, yes, you've captured the environment here well. Not too many specular highlights in it. There's good detail there. Um, what I would have liked to have seen you do is get out your reflector and throw some light into the underside of this fungi, particularly the dominant one at the bottom there, and particularly into that black hole underneath it. You're never going to get full detail there, but I think you'd find a reflector would actually bring out a little bit more of the detail, particularly of the ferns and what have you that are growing there, as well as give you lovely lighting on the underside, the fronds of the fungus.
A preening wicker.
Yep, got the worker doing something, that's fine. Um, it's great you presented it in a nice format, almost square format. Again, we've got a lighting ratio problem here, that your background is quite burnt out. The worker itself is in shadow detail. The detail is there on the bird, but it probably just needs a little bit of enhancing just to bring that detail out a little bit more, I think would be helpful. I'm not sure that you can pull the background back as much as I would like to see because it's basically overexposed and I think this detail probably isn't there. But certainly some work on the bird itself would be helpful. Just looking at the head there, it's again, you can see the head and beak are pretty much lost in that sort of shadow area. But even if you just worked on that area there and brought out that detail, I think would give even a bit more validity, if you like, to the bird itself. You could probably crop, because of the bright background, I would tend to crop as much as I could out of the sides, just to allow us to concentrate more on the bird itself.
A feral red deer, Cervus elephas, feeding on sweet briar berries.
Yep. Um, yes, nice and sharp. Again, that's fine. Good environmental detail here. Um, the problem, I guess, and it's not a photographic problem necessarily, is the fact that the environment is kind of camouflaging, if you like, the subject, which is probably why they're there in the first place anyway. So that's fine. The overall lighting, the flat lighting suggests it's probably been taken on a cloudy day, which is fine. So you haven't got competing lighting problems with the subject against the background. I think to make the image more valid, I did a fair bit of cropping on this one as well. Um, Quite a bit off the right, quite a bit off the left, perhaps a bit off the bottom, just so that we move in and concentrate on the subject. And when you do that, I think you'll find that the distractions that we currently have of its environment become less obvious, and your subject will stand out more from the background. Perhaps a little bit of sharpening, I don't know whether you've done it or not, would be helpful too on the subject.
Platelia regia, royal spoonbill at Travis Wetlands.
Travis Wetland Sky, eh? Thought I recognised it. Um, yeah, again, similar comments to what we've made before. You captured it in flight, that's great. They're lovely birds to photograph when they're flying. They're actually not that hard, not as hard as some other birds. Um, but the problem you've got whenever you're photographing birds in flight is that you're almost inevitably photographing them against a brighter background, be it the blue sky or a cloudy sky or what have you. And the end result of that is that you usually end up with uh, the underwing areas being in shadow. So it often means that you, in post production, you need to be working on those areas to bring out the detail. In this case, we've got the detail there, as you can see it. Uh, there's a little bit of yellow on the right hand wing there. You can see the feather detail quite well captured there as well, also on the tail, and same applies there and part of the body. So I think to present it in all its glory, I think you need to be doing some work, post-production work on that. The white here there on the top of the wings is a little burnt out. You might try and recover. I think you might be able to recover a bit of detail there. Any that you could recover would be helpful in that case. Same on the underside of its head and beak, just bring out the detail there. It's potentially a lovely image, just to my mind needs that little bit more work to bring out its full potential.
Score 4, Veiled Lady Valas Indicitus.
I quite like the detail on this one when first I saw it. Um, I can't say I've seen this type of fungi myself. I certainly haven't photographed it, and I would have liked to have been there when you were. Anyway, so you've captured it quite nicely. Um, some lovely lighting coming through on the veils, if you like, of each one, particularly the one on the left. I think that's been nicely captured. There's some good contextual detail there um, as well, uh, indicating it's been taken in a natural environment. The one little problem with it is the one I keep briefing on about is the highlights. Speak of the highlights of the light coming through the bush environmental area in the background there, which I feel could be pulled back, could be lessened. Don't You obviously can't take it out, but you can pull it back a bit so it's not competing, or those areas are not competing with the detail on the fungus itself. The black tops on the fungus there, there's detail there, perhaps just a little bit of work to bring that out a wee bit. And in the background there, and the shadow areas in the background, you could actually very subtly just bring out the lighting up a little bit in those darker areas there, just to give us that a little bit more environmental detail.
Last October's light show.
Yeah, well, you're lucky you can see them down there because I believe the odd person does capture them up here, but we're not really far enough south to do it properly. And of course, living in the city is very difficult to actually see them against the competing light. You captured that well. I felt the lovely warm tonal values in the aurora itself. I love the pinky tones there, the little streaks of light coming down into the yellow on the horizon, and punctuated there by those little white spots of the stars and what have you. Normally, you'd say a background, you don't want those sort of little highlight areas, but I think it's in context very much here, and that's fine. I was in two minds about the foreground there, the harbour, but I think you probably need that. Um, I would perhaps just crop a little bit off the bottom in particular, just so that we get a little bit more of the horizon as of the aurora as a portion of the overall image. Maybe too, you could do a little bit of work on the harbour water there, just to brighten up a little bit that lovely reflected detail of the aurora there, so that it's more in balance, if you like, with the lighting of the town.
Gannett's on the lookout.
Yeah, lovely birds, nice to photograph. Um, Murawai up here out of Auckland is one of our favourite spots for our club people to go to. Um, and always get some interesting photographs here when they're nesting, which is what you've done here. There's pretty good exposure overall on this one. There's some good detail, further detail on the birds. There's little or no burnout in the exposure in the whites, perhaps just a whisker, maybe in one or two areas, but nothing too bad. Good tonal values in the heads and beaks, and we can see the eyes, they're all sharp, and a good environmental detail with a lovely darker lighting condition on the sea in the background, which pops the subjects out from it. Yeah.
Kotuku white heron at the Ashley River.
Yeah. Again, some pretty good detail here. Um, you've pretty much got the whites reasonably right. It's reasonably bright lighting condition. And there's a little bit of burnout, if you like, in the some of the whites there, particularly on the leading edge of the wings and the head of the bird. But again, it's not that bad. The head probably could be pulled back a bit, and also maybe the neck and the right hand leg. Just a whisker. Um, Lovely reflection. Um, I personally would just love to see you bring a little bit more detail out of the shadows on the bird itself, the underwing area there. Don't make it the same lighting condition as the rest of the bird, but just make it a bit whiter, but still leave the suggestion of it being in shadow. And equally, coming to the reflection, doing much the same on it. Again, don't bring it out to the point where it's competing with the main subject, but bring it out a bit so that it kind of balances a bit so that we get a little bit more even balance, if you like, between the subject and the reflection. Some nice contextual environmental detail there, particularly across the top. And it's nice and sharp.
Score 5, a sacred kingfisher, kotare feeding.
Yeah, I loved the point that you captured the action here that could not have been that easy to have done because these birds don't seem to like humans being around terribly much. Certainly the ones that live up our way. It might be the way of life in Auckland, of course, that's the cause of that. Maybe they're more placid down your way. But however, putting that aside, I love the fact of you capturing that and capturing the feeding moment. Um, Having said all that, the environmental details, great, it's fine. Having said all that, um, if it were mine, I'd be doing a bit of work on it, on my main hobby horses tonight, and that is that detail, the highlights down there in the bottom right-hand corner, particularly the light areas. I'd be pulling those back a wee bit. And the other thing I'd be doing with it, just to really make it pop, is just brighten up both birds, the bird and the baby bird or the chick, just so that they stand out a little bit more from the tree on which they're sitting. So, but it is a lovely image, and I think it's one that could be enhanced just that little bit further by a little bit of post-production work.
Score 5, marbled godwit, Lamosa fedoa.
Lovely detail in these birds, isn't it, as you can see here, both when you capture them as here, when it's out hunting for food, fishing, if you like, in the estuary or somewhere, wading around. That lovely mottled brown feather detail. It's beautiful. It's even lovelier sometimes when you get capture of them in flight and get the lighting on them. The thing, it's nice and sharp. There's lovely feather detail there. There's not much more I would do with the bird itself. It's been well captured. It's been captured in lovely lighting, which actually does make the image. And the fact that the environment in which you captured it, the water, is actually darker, so that does cause the bird to pop out, if you like, from its environment. So I felt this was a very well captured image. Just nice reflection. Possibly you might like to just brighten that up a wee bit. Not much.
Black-backed jackal.
The day of. It looks like it's a night of, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm not sure what its environment was when taking this. It looks like I don't know, it looks like it might have been taken at night. I don't know. It's a lovely image. It's nice and sharp. I like the fact that you've got reflection was feeding or taking in a drink or something or other. It's all great. Perhaps like to see you just bring out a little bit more detail both on the body of the jackal and of the reflection. And I think the background, I actually had a look at this and it's sort of bluey toned background, I think, from memory. And I'd perhaps just like to see you bring a little bit more of that into the image, if only to just give it a bit of context, if you like. It's just a little bit stark the way it is without that detail. But for all that, a lovely image, and that's why I've given it a pretty high mark.
And best in show, 3 bats.
Now, having battered on, so to speak, about backgrounds all night, um, I I thought about this one. I love this capture. Let's be straight up about it. I love the beautiful detail that you captured here of the bats, the the flower, whatever it's they're feeding on or working around. I love that. It's beautiful capture. Um, for a while, I wondered about the background being dark. I mean, it does, in a sense, it really does make the image in the sense that it pops the bats out from the background. And then when I thought about it, well, bats fly at night, don't they? So how are you going to get any great detail in something that flies at night? So in this particular case, I swallowed my pride and said, right, it's probably a night shot. It's probably taken in a cave or something or other. That's a natural environment. And let's face it, to get this image, to get that detail under those lighting conditions, well, I don't know whether you used a flash, or presumably you have in some form or other. But whatever you've done well. And you've captured a lovely composition apart from the capturing these bats in action. Um, you've also made a lovely composition with the diagonal composition of the bats and the counterpoint of the flower coming down from the top right hand corner. So I was very happy to give this one the top award. Well done.
Bob, on behalf of Christchurch Photographic Society, we'd really like to thank you for all the work and effort you've put in. For those that don't know, Bob had a stroke sometime a little while ago, and so his computer skills aren't up to speed as what they were, so he's much more comfortable judging verbally. So we really appreciate the work that you've done on this, and again, thank you so much.
Thank you all for inviting me. Thank you.
Right, without further ado, we'll carry on and we will pass out the awards. Diana, would you mind giving us a hand? Thank you. Oh, I better read it. Oh, sorry. Carolyn Alcock, the Goldfinch. Ming Ping, the African Great Egret. Judy Kirk for the male turdus, blackbird. John Thornton for the fungi dude. Sue Coombs for the fern bird. And Adrian for another name that I can't say. Joe Curtis for the owl. John Hawkins. Shirley Wilson for the mountain bladderwort. Dawn Kirk for the Nesta Notabilis. I'm speeding through. John Hunt for the Koromako. Lucy Ferguson for the Shoveler Ducks, Drake Ducks. Nicola Jackson for the Spoonbill in Flight. Kay Miller for the Nova Step Kururi dude. Nelson for the Saddleback. Liz Armand for the Royal Spoonbill. Francesca Davies for the Male California Quail. Jan Bogue for the Nesting Cormorants. Karen McConkey for Snow Roller, the Phenomenon. Barry Dench for the Leopard Morning Hunt. Janine Money for the Saltwater Crocodile. Oh, well, this one's awkward. Diana Andrews for the Porcelain Fungus. Bonnie Street Camp for the Preening Weka. I thought this was his. Peter Curtis for the Feral Red Deer. Alan Moore for the Platelia regia. Oh, and now we're on to the high acceptances. So this is Heecham Kim for the Veiled Lady. It's lovely. Desmond New for the last October's light show. Well done. Ron Willems for the Gannets on the Lookout. Maxine Cooper for the Kutuku White Heron. Now we're up to the honours. So JK for the Sacred Kingfisher. Ian Harrison for the Marbled Godwit. Good work. Karen Dance for the Black-backed Jekyll. That's what I meant. And for honours and best in show, the 3 bats is for Trish Brown. Were there any notices that anybody needed to share tonight? Okay.
Not a good one, unfortunately. I have to let everybody know that Karen Alcock's husband died early last week, so our thoughts are sent to her, and we've sent her some flowers and a wee notice. So just that's not really wanted to say, but there it is.
All right. Thanks you everybody very much, and we'll see you here again next week.